Now, the dropping of masks in schools has been met with mixed reactions. For more, I'm joined by Matakanye from the National Association of School Governing Bodies and the South African Democratic Teachers Union General Secretary Mugwena Maluleke. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with the School Governing Bodies of Association. Mr. Matakanye, what's your take on the dropping of masks in schools?
Good day, Oscar, and good day to your viewers at home. Our take on the issue of the mask, we think that it's premature for schools to really drop the wearing of the mask. Simple reason is that the season that we are in is winter, but secondly, it is that we don't have enough ventilation in our schools. We have struggled with that, and clearly it is that until such time that we can see zero death in terms of the statistics in our country, it may not be advisable because some of the schools are overcrowded, and because of that, it can easily be transmissible. So we need to ensure that we advise our teachers, we advise our parents and our communities not to drop their guards when it comes to this particular pandemic, because the mere fact that we have got 1,000 cases a day, that's not the true reflection of where we are in the country, because we no longer have testing centers as we used to have. So we may not be relying on the statistic that is being there. So for us, the advice is very simple. Save the teachers, save the learners, save our communities. Let's wear our masks, and then we can then assess as we go towards September, October, November, whether we are able to, contain the transmission and so forth. So we don't think that the department should just jump into this particular announcement, especially that the announcement is qualified. It says for now. And once a person says for now, it means that there is uncertainty about how the evolution of this particular pandemic is going to be going around. So let's save our schools, let's save our communities.
Mr. Maluleke, representing SATU and the teachers, what's your take on the dropping of masks, especially like Mr. Matakanye has said, during the winter season, which we know is the time when the virus is at its worst?
We believe that Matakanye is right in that even if we're not scientists, but as practitioners and the people who are there on the core phase of this particular pandemic in our schools, one is that there's not enough ventilation in our schools, and we know that in winter in particular, when we come back in July, we are going to be confronted with the cold front, and therefore we will not be able to have enough ventilation, and then the masks are one of those measures that will be able to take. Our advice to the parents and to the management of the schools and the Department of Education is to delay the dropping of masks in our schools, and then we do a proper assessment, because we know that every day 57 people are still dying from this particular pandemic, and that may not be the real numbers, because we know that we no longer have testing centers that used to be open, and therefore in an unventilated area you need to have some form of safety, and that is only guaranteed through the mask. So from our perspective as a union, it is not the right time for the schools to drop the masks.
Well, Mr. Maluleke, I just had a conversation with Mr. Elijah Mhlanga, who is the spokesperson for the department, and their take is that this process is being led by the Department of Health, and the Department of Health has come out to say that this is the time and we should not necessarily be worried with the dropping of masks at schools, and also the fact that schools also have got their own prerogative of whether or not they want to continue with masks.
Well, I must indicate that we need to correct certain things that are saying the school have prerogative. The schools have never had a prerogative. They were guided by the standard operating procedures that were determined in terms of the Disaster Management Act. And immediately after the Disaster Management Act had put to a stop by the Presidency and the Cabinet, therefore it was left to the Department of Health. We are aware that they are informed by science, but we are saying the season in which we are, it is not advisable for us to drop the mask. Secondly, it is that it's based on the contextual factors that we are confronted with in our schools. Overcrowding is one of the areas that normally exacerbate the transmission of this particular virus, and no ventilation in our schools, sometimes the lack of water and so forth, it's going to compound the problem in our schools. When we come back in July, apply, clearly it is that it's going to be even more problematic for our teachers and our learners to avoid this particular transmission. So this particular pandemic has shown us that we need to be alert and not drop our guards. So the Department of Education must not at any point mislead the communities. They have got to make sure that we see it as the stakeholders in the department and then make sure that at the right time we can drop the mask. I can tell you the schools will be closed come August when we come back because the transmission will be there. 57 deaths. It's not something that we can really glorify. It's not something that we can be happy about. This is death. It's people's lives. And therefore, we don't want to see those things happening in our schools and in our communities. We want everybody to be safe.
Mr. Matakanye, just to bring you in onto this conversation, now earlier on when I did speak to the spokesperson for the Department of Education, he alluded to some of the adverse effects on the younger children, especially when it comes to them learning the formation of words and being unable to see a teacher's face during that process, and how it has impacted badly on those younger learners. What is your take as an association on the dropping of masks?
Good morning, Katlego. And Mugwena Maluleke, all your listeners and viewers of the newsroom. I don't agree less than the General Secretary that I think at any stage we ever said that the younger children, the older children, should not put masks, this must put masks, and all those things. And there could be some serious contradictions that even after the teachers vaccinated and the old children vaccinated, we said, there was a word that said, keep on putting mask. So we've extremely insulated ourselves even after we vaccinated. Then we were told that now we should continue putting masks. So there's serious contradictions. When it is going to be a winter, then we are told no, lower your guards and there's no need for mask anymore. Then we see that there's going to be trouble. I think as Dr. Maluleke has already said, we are in winter. I mean, the statistic that showed that now people are still dying, it means that now the pandemic is still with us. So we can't lower our guards to insulate ourselves against this animal. So we must make sure that we continuously protect ourselves against the animal until we are being told that now for a year perhaps there's no death, there's nothing. And people will decide whether they put on still mask or they don't put mask after we have been convinced that yes, it is a year, it is 2 years. I think the Secretary has already indicated very clearly that a situation of our schools is different from any other situation, particularly the schools of the poorest of the poor, the schools of the working class, the schools of the township. They are overcrowding in those classes. And you'll remember that we had a problem because these schools that I've made mention of, those were the schools mostly affected when we came with the non-negotiables. There must be water. I mean, you know, Katlego, there's no water. And when you say there's no water, it could be those schools that I've mentioned. No proper ventilation. I mean, you really refer to those schools that I've mentioned. When you talk about the abolition, then we talk about those particular schools that I've made mention of. So I think those schools really, rather, they must be insulated against this animal because they are schools that are going to be seriously affected. And those schools also, you'll remember, Katlego, that we had a problem of space. Even now, we have got a problem with they are overcrowded, those schools. So I think they must be really insulated against this animal if we to select schools. But we are not saying we have to select schools. I think all these children are ours. We must protect them. Even the teachers are ours. We must protect the teachers against this pandemic. We must protect these children against this pandemic. It is true that we really have to discuss this matter very seriously with the minister. We have to discuss this matter with the communities. We have to discuss this matter with the parents and even the teachers. I mean, I'm happy that the General Secretary has indicated already a position that we have to really discuss with the stakeholders to say, when it comes to these very schools that I've mentioned, I think a serious conversation must be held so that how do we protect the schools against this pandemic? We can't just stand by and say, no, things are just normal. When we have been always saying these schools that I've made mention of, they are overcrowded, therefore. And we were told by the scientists that we must not go into overcrowding. Spaces like shopping malls, when you go to shopping malls, put on a mask. Just imagine getting a class of 70 people, for 70 learners, then what will happen to us? So we think really we must have a serious conversation that now we must be considered. These very schools must be considered, even if maybe there are other schools are not considered. But these schools that I've made mention of, they must be seriously considered so that how do we best insulate ourselves against this pandemic.
So, Matakanye, what do you then believe could be the reason why the department chose to take this decision so prematurely?
Come again, Kato?
I'm just saying, what do you believe could be the reasoning behind the department taking the decision to remove masks from our schools during this winter season? Why do you think they did it so prematurely?
I really cannot talk on behalf of the department, but I don't know what made them to believe that it is scientifically correct to remove the mask away from these children without really talking to us first and talking to the teachers, talking to everybody involved in education, even the children, because they have got their organizations, they could have been consulted. Then we understand their view. What is their view? Perhaps we could have convinced them that now their view is premature, as you have said, that then our schools should continue putting on the mask until we are convinced that our children, our teachers, and everybody involved in education is not going to be affected by this pandemic.
Right. Mr. Maluleke, just to close off, it seems as though there weren't any discussions between all various parties with the Department of Education. What are the steps that you will be taking forward, if any, with regards to the issue of masks being removed in schools?
Yes, there was no discussion amongst ourselves, and therefore we believe as a union that the department owes us that particular conversation so that we assess the situation. Our statement is very simple. It is that we have got to take the best decision in the best interest of our children and of our teachers and those who are working in our schools. And our statement is very simple. Don't lower your guards, wear your masks until such time that there is a proper assessment for that. These not wearing of the mask as a condition. You know, when the Minister of Health says, for now, then you must know that it is not for certain. Therefore, there is something that it is informing that particular statement to say, for now, you may not wear the mask. So we believe that our schools must be allowed to continue to do that. And as I'm saying, the standard operating procedures are still in place and they have to remain in place. Let's make sure that we don't take decisions as a Department of Education based on finances. Let's take decisions on the basis of the safety of communities, that these particular learners are coming from, that these particular teachers are coming from, because that is what must inform our decision when we are going to say the mask must no longer be taken, no longer be worn. I believe that that discussion It's long overdue. So the department, we are going to be asking the department tomorrow, because there's meetings, and then we'll have to put this on the table when we are discussing the issue of the future and the transforming of education, to then say what are the things that needs to be put in place now in making sure that the future of our children is not jeopardized by impromptu decisions that mostly are informed by the fiscal instead of the education perspective or the education side of things, because fiscal issues like they no longer afford to buy the masks and so forth, those cannot be the basis of a decision making. The basis of a decision making is what we have asked. What has happened with the learners that were in the overcrowded classes in terms of word formation and other things. Therefore, when the learners are wearing their masks, the teachers could be using the shields, making sure that the learners are able to see the formation of words and so forth, because then they are able to show that. And the teachers have been very innovative. They've been improvising in that particular regard. Yes, we have got a deficit. We need to address it. But not wearing the mask is going to reverse the gains that we have made in education. So let's not reverse any gain that we have made in terms of forming resilience and establishing a system that is then able to say safety first, and then we are able to educate this particular. Imagine the schools are going to be closed, and I don't want to even imagine a situation where schools are going to be closed because many of the learners or the teachers are infected by this particular thing. We will regret that particular day. Let's not do it.
Thank you.